Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Recently I was contacted by Jeremy of Hogg Publishing, who asked if I would be interested in reviewing his adventure board game Glory. A quick visit to the Hogg Publishing website was all it took for me to say yes, because Glory is a streamlined family-friendly game walking in the hallowed footsteps of the likes of Talisman and Runebound. How could I say no? So here we have the second edition of the game, which comes in a tidy little box, but the size of this box is somewhat deceptive. This is a box with absolutely no space to spare. It's packed to the brim, and if an expansion came out, you wouldn't be storing it in this core box. I have to say, I do like this cover art with the mysterious city and the gold foil on the title, but I think there are some omissions on this box that for me at least would impact on whether I would consider picking it up off a store shelf. The first omission is that while the cover states 1 to 4 players with a playing time of 90 minutes, there is no mention of an age range. This is a real shame because I think this is a really solid option for families looking for an easy access point for fantasy gaming. The rules are incredibly simple, making it ideal for younger gamers, but there is also enough going on for the older casual gamers to find amusement in the proceedings. Both my wife and my 12-year-old daughter enjoyed this game more than I did. However, more of a concern is if we look at the reverse of the box. We get a piece of artwork and a little fluff text, but what we don't get is any real sense of what the game is. Is it a dungeon crawler, a kingdom builder, a worker placement, a card game? There's just no real sense here of what you're getting into. There aren't even any images of the components, another shame as they are uniformly excellent, and there is no mention of one of the game's most interesting elements, its unique selling point of being a dry erase game that lets you scribble all over your character board and even the game cards. This concept is actually really neat because not only does it cut down on tokens you might need for bookkeeping things like health and power, it also harkens back to filling in character sheets for role-playing games or even keeping track of your characters in HeroQuest. It's also very nicely integrated into much of what you will be doing in the game. Several of the characters have skills that require the accumulation of some kind of experience, and you tick off checkboxes until you achieve those goals. The main aim of the game is to acquire the titular glory, which again you tick off on your character boards, and during your adventures you will gain secret information that you can note down either on the front or back of your character as you see fit. Many cards also have checkboxes so that you can track finite resources or mark when an ability becomes active. It's well thought out and feels like more than a gimmick. It's part of the game, making everything feel very smooth and simple and ensuring any information you need is always in front of you. It also means the game can focus on providing fewer but higher quality components, focusing production costs where they are needed most and making it possible to cram more game into the relatively small box. So in terms of contents, there isn't a huge amount here, but everything adds to the gameplay. You get a really lovely board styled like an old pirate map, and I really like this a lot. It has a simple, attractive design that makes me feel a little nostalgic for when I used to draw maps like this when I was a kid, just not as well. But also, this map has been thought out and designed in such a way as to make playing the game as easy as possible. If you study it closely, you will see there are 7 types of location: the castle in the middle, 4 towns, 4 layers, and then havens, which are the trees, battles, the shields, fate spaces, the question marks, and the dreaded blank spaces where nothing interesting ever happens. All of these locations are mirrored in every direction across the board. I'll talk more about why this is so important when we cover the rules, but for now it's enough to realise that whichever section of the board you are in, it's very easy to find the map locations you need. Next you get 9 oversized character boards. These have nice artwork and plenty of space for scratching notes on. This little froggy chappy is the totem. He's my favourite character because he's good at taking down stronger enemies, and you can ramp up his power pretty easily. You also, of course, get a standee for each character. Then there's a set of 4 8-sided dice in 4 colours and 4 dry erase pens, 1 for each player. There are some cardboard coins, which are the only actual tokens in the game, and then 6 decks of different cards. Of course you get a rules booklet. This weighs in at just 8 pages, and that includes the cover art, the map legend on the back, and an alternative mode of play. There's really only 3 pages of core rules, and without the diagrams you could fit them on a single page. In terms of actual instructions, this game makes Talisman look a bit long-winded. Finally, there's a book of solo play scenarios. Glory is a competitive game and doesn't work as a solo experience without modifications, and this booklet provides those modifications. More than that, it links together a series of scenarios into a continuous campaign with persisting effects. over the course of the campaign, you will play as every character, each of which weaves their own adventure into a larger narrative of a land under threat from a growing evil, and your successes and failures will have an ongoing impact. It's a neat little addition to the box, but in this video we're going to be focusing on the main attraction, the competitive multiplayer game. First, to be clear, this isn't a narrative-driven game. While there are moments of storytelling, an enchanting encounter with a pixie, a growing sense of foreboding as you explore the wilderness, a dangerous encounter with goblins, this is ultimately a race game with fantasy trappings. The idea is to be the first player to score 20 glory points, or 25 in the alternative dragon mode, by completing quests, battling monsters, and clearing out these super dangerous layers on the outskirts of the kingdom. At the start of the game you lay out the board, place one face down quest under each of the 4 towns, place one face down layer card under each of the 4 layers, and 5 face up cards above the board to represent the market in the central castle. You then pick a character, take their starting gear from the goods deck, take some coins from the bank, and then place your standee on any empty space adjacent to the castle. Each player also takes one of the dice and one of the dry erase pens. You are now ready to begin. The first player rolls their dice, and then they must move the number of spaces rolled. Oh yeah, this is roll and move. Proper, you have to move the exact number you rolled, honest to goodness old school roll and move. But hear me out. For me, there are good elements to this approach. There are bad elements too. The worst element is that you are rolling a d8, and that makes rolling to move very swingy. The difference between moving 1 space and 8 spaces is significant, and much more significant than the difference between 1 and 6 when rolling a d6. It's also a large distribution of results, each with an exact chance of turning up, which means you are less likely to get the result you want, and it's also less consistent or predictable than rolling something like 2d6, where the bell curve naturally leads to more results around 7. The other major issue is that the map features branching routes. Every time you roll to move, even though you aren't allowed to retrace your steps or re-enter the same space on any given turn, it's likely you will still have several paths you could tread. So each roll entails a quick check as you count up your moves in each possible direction to see if it's possible to land on something you want. There is a silver lining though. Several actually. First of all, as I mentioned before, the map is symmetrical. It doesn't matter which half or quarter of the board you are in, you will have within reach exactly the same number of locations as you would have in any other half or quarter. All 4 towns are exactly 4 spaces from the castle, and the castle and every town are exactly 3 spaces away from a battle and a fate, 5 spaces from a haven, and 8 spaces from a lair. You very quickly start to know what result you need to get to a location you want, and what your options are for any given roll. Furthermore, the castle, the towns, and the lairs all halt your movement immediately. That means you don't need to roll the exact number to land on them, you only need to roll at least enough to reach them. Only havens, battles, and fate spaces require an exact roll to land on them, and that's explained narratively. As you are wandering the land, the castles, towns, and lairs are fixed landmarks. You know where they are. But havens are lucky finds, while fate spaces and battles are random occurrences. There is no way you can guarantee you will stumble across them as you explore. In this way, your roll to move is a sort of random event generator, just as much as it is a way to determine your movement across the board. Additionally, there is a special march action you can take. Once per turn you can expend 1 health to move 1 additional space. This may seem like a small reward for giving up valuable health, but it can make all the difference, and it's actually very easy to heal in this game and even easier to avoid dangerous encounters, making the march option worthwhile almost every time. I mean, if you are 1 space away from a location that restores all your life points, why wouldn't you use the march option? And finally, there are plenty of items and skills that grant movement abilities, such as the magic map you can discard to move anywhere. As a result, roll and move isn't nearly as detrimental as you might at first imagine, although from time to time it's still a nuisance, normally when you need to move 3 spaces and you roll at 1. So anyway, you roll your dice and you get to move. At the very beginning, for the first few turns at least, play will be a little unfocused. You don't have a quest at the beginning of the game, you don't know what quests are available at the towns, and you don't know what is waiting for you at each layer. It doesn't matter, you aren't strong enough to fight it anyway. Your only goal is to gain glory, but there is nothing immediately on the board that will guarantee that glory. So you sort of mooch about a bit, looking for something to do. If you visit the castle, you get all your health back, and then you can spend coins on the available goods above the board. After shopping, you replenish the market from the goods deck. This is normally a good thing to do on the first turn. You start with a decent amount of cash and you are standing right outside the castle. If you visit one of the towns, you get all your health back and you can also peek at the quest there. These quests usually involve going out into the world and doing stuff. Let's check out a few examples. This one is pretty straightforward. You have to deliver messages around the kingdom, so you have to visit all 4 towns and the castle. Easy. This one is also pretty straightforward. You need to clear out some monsters by fighting in the 4 farthest battle locations from the town you are in. This is another example where the map design makes things nice and clear. There are 8 battle spaces on the board, 2 in each quarter, and 4 towns, 1 on each edge. So whichever town you are in, you immediately know you need to fight in the 4 battle spaces on the opposite half of the board. This mission does, however, highlight one of the main aggravations when playing this game. If you have to land on a battle, fate or haven, you have to land by exact count. So yes, with the roll and move mechanism you can sometimes find yourself circling the drain, constantly jumping backwards and forwards across the space you need because you keep rolling too high, much the same way you might struggle to land on a pie space in Trivial Pursuit. As a final example, we have this mission, which involves engaging 3 undead enemies. Engaging simply means fighting a round of combat, whether you win or lose. This is another type of mission that can become a little frustrating in play, because the only way to engage enemies is to land on battle spaces, by exact count remember, and the only way to engage an undead enemy is to randomly pull one from the battle deck. If you don't land on the spaces or don't draw the cards, there is no real proactive way you can achieve this quest objective, you just have to hope that fate is kind. One of the interesting things about the quests is they are kept face down on the board. To start the quest you must see it, which involves landing on the town and peeking at the card. From that point on you can work towards achieving the quest, but that doesn't stop anybody else who lands on the town from taking a look and trying to complete the quest as well. The first person to achieve the objective and return to the town is the winner. They will flip the quest face up and then gain the reward, which is normally 2 glory points and 3 gold. But a second hero is now allowed to achieve the quest objective for a lesser reward, and because the card was flipped face up on the board, every hero is considered to have seen it and everyone can start working towards it whether or not they have ever visited that town before. This is a pretty neat catch-up mechanism, as it means you don't have to waste time travelling to the town to see the quest for yourself. You are immediately eligible and can focus your efforts on achieving the goal. Of course, the reward is smaller, and after the second hero claims it, that quest is resolved and no longer available. Next we need to discuss the Lairs. These are situated at the farthest reaches of the kingdom in the corners of the board. Land on one of these and you can peek at the creature lurking inside. These things are tough. Stupidly so. You need a lot of stat boosts, items and abilities to consider taking them on. But if, after peeking at the card, you do decide to engage in combat and you win, you gain 5 glory points. Destroying lair creatures will normally be the way someone gets to 20 glory, because the more glory you have, the harder it is to earn more, and eventually you will run out of other options. Which I guess leads us on to talk about the battle spaces. When you land on a battle space you draw a battle card and you choose if you want to engage in combat. And yes, I do mean you get to choose. If you draw a card and it's a mighty dragon that will turn you into a fine red mist, you can just choose to discard the card and end your turn. However, you will frequently choose to engage enemies, especially early on in the game, because fighting stuff is a way to get glory points. The downside is that glory is often only up for grabs while your current glory score is low. For example, here's a goblin, one of the weakest enemies in the game. It's so weak you can actually choose to discard it and draw something else if you consider it an unworthy opponent. You will see at the bottom of the card it says that if you slay the goblin you will get 1 glory, but only if you currently have 10 glory or less. Once you have 10 glory, there's no longer any point in fighting goblins, you are wasting your time. And of course, the stronger the enemy is, the higher the glory cap is. This Will-o'-the-Wisp, for example, will only grant you 3 glory if your current glory is 17 or less. This is another catch-up mechanism baked into the game's design. In adventure games there is often the threat of a runaway leader. They get a good magical weapon or scoop up some experience early on that enables them to outpace everyone else, making the result of the game a foregone conclusion. This isn't possible in Glory, because as your glory points increase, your options for gaining more decrease. You can only complete each quest once, and other heroes might complete them before you get a chance, and eventually you become so adept at killing monsters nobody will sing your praises for it. You can't go for an easy win. Ultimately, the game forces you into the Lairs. It leaves you no option but to stand toe to toe with the greatest threats of the kingdom, and every turn you delay, you are gifting everybody else at the table the chance to catch up. The next space to consider is the Haven. When you visit one, you heal 1 health. That means that between the towns, the havens and the castle, you are never more than 3 spaces from a place where you can heal. The threat of death really is minimal. But then, I guess that's no bad thing, as this game does have player elimination. While at the Haven, you also get to peek at the closest lair without visiting it. Additionally, on your next turn, instead of rolling the dice, you can move anywhere within 5 spaces. This is yet another way to mitigate rolling to move, as with a move of up to 5 spaces, you can get from any haven to the castle, the 2 closest towns, the closest lair, the 4 closest battle spaces, or the 4 closest fate spaces. Which leads us neatly to the final spaces of note on the board, the fate spaces. These are your chance spots. When you land on them, you draw a fate card and apply it. Some are good, some are bad, and some fall between the cracks. This one, for example, lets you give a coin to another player to gain a glory point. And that's your little tour of the kingdom over. As you can see, most of the time your turn will comprise rolling to move, moving to a space, and then looking at or drawing a card. The other major thing you will do is fight. You will fight at battle and lair spaces, and the combat is always handled in the same way. You and your opponents roll a d8 and you add your strike value. The character with the highest score is the winner and will inflict damage on the loser equal to their power score. Once damage applied is equal to a character's health, they are defeated. Heroes always choose when to engage in combat and have the ability to withdraw without penalty after each dice roll. So the stakes are pretty low. Most of the time, if you are getting a beating, the worst that will happen is you will withdraw from the battle, wasting your current turn. It's very unlikely a player would commit to a fight where losing would result in their death and removal from the game. And that is it. There are rules for a dragon mode where undefeated dragons remain on the board and you play to 25 glory instead of 20, and there is the solo campaign, but the game itself doesn't get any more complicated or involved than that. You wander around the land, fighting monsters and completing quests, gaining stats and skills until you feel confident enough to take on the Lairs. Which means, I suppose at this point I should talk about the 3 ways you can improve your character. The first is simple enough. You can go to the castle and buy equipment. Most of the equipment gives you an edge in combat. The second way is to fulfill any requirements on your character board that result in a permanent gain of some kind. This isn't applicable for all characters, but the Knight, Totem and Witness all have character traits that allow them to gain a stat boost. The Knight, for example, gains 1 point in power after fighting in 3 battles. The final way is the most interesting. As you travel the world, you will gain life experience, and that experience will convert into the kind of knowledge that allows you to gain new skills. For every 5 fate cards you draw, you get to draw 1 ability card, and every time your glory score hits a multiple of 5, you get a coin and then you can draw 2 ability cards and keep 1. The abilities are a mixed bag. Some of them are permanent, like this Rest Maker ability that grants you 1 bonus glory every time you kill something undead, but many of them have a finite number of uses. Amble here lets you roll for movement a second time when you land on a blank space, and it has 2 uses. You can see there are 2 checkboxes on the card, so you can use your dry erase pen to mark off each time you use the ability. Unfortunately, many abilities are single use, like Home Sense, which you can discard to move to a castle or town. And yes, it can suck when you see other players gaining powerful permanent abilities while you keep drawing 1-use abilities. But that's the nature of the game, and as far as I'm concerned, it's always fun drawing randomly to see how your character will evolve. But there is one more neat thing I need to mention about the abilities. Once again, many of them incorporate a kind of catch-up mechanism. Take this Resolve card for instance. It only triggers when someone else at the table has more glory than you do, giving you a little boost to catch up and stay in the fight. Between abilities like this, the caps on glory you can obtain from fighting battles, the reveal of completed quests so that everyone else can have a go at them, and the limited number of uses on many of the most powerful items and abilities, the game does a pretty decent job of keeping everything balanced. And in all of my games, the person in the lead has changed multiple times. I've never once felt like winning was beyond my grasp, which is a pretty impressive feat for any game. But at the same time, this approach can also start to feel like it's artificially extending the game. The techniques that keep everyone in the game also keep the game from ending when it really should. As a result, I find Glory runs just a little longer than I would like. I am not normally one to complain about the length of a game. If I am thoroughly engaged, a game can run all night if it needs to. But here, I do start to feel like there isn't enough to do to fill the runtime. The gameplay is so smooth and streamlined, it doesn't take too long to start feeling like I've seen everything there is to see, and then, when I start to hit those roadblocks, it feels like I'm stuck looping through the same motions until I can find something that will get things going again. This is only compounded when you end up stuck circling the board trying to draw specific types of enemies or trying to land on specific types of locations. The very low stakes can also add to that overall sense of spinning your wheels. You can always choose to walk away from a fight you can't win, and it's just so easy to recover your health. Of course, that's a positive as well as a negative. There is so little chance of dying, players are rarely eliminated, and that's a good thing for a family game where there may be younger children who wouldn't take kindly to being unceremoniously ejected from the game too early. But at the same time, it also encourages a low-risk strategy. There is never enough incentive to make that dangerous play. But I feel like I'm starting to sound down on the game, and that's not really true. I admit this game didn't really work for me, or at least not to the degree I would have wished for, but I see so much good in it. I think it's beautifully presented. My one negative comment about the presentation would probably be that I would have liked the art style to be more consistent across the cards. It's all great, but the game board doesn't look like the character boards, which don't look like the fate cards, which don't look like the items, which don't look like the layers, which don't look like the monsters. And I love the art on these monsters. It's a wonderful, distinctive style. But regardless, everything is well presented. The rules are incredibly concise and instantly accessible. There are enough quests, layers, battles and fates to ensure you will get different experiences when you play. The baked-in mechanisms for preventing a runaway leader keep everyone involved, and the low risk of early retirement for any of the heroes means nobody really has to endure sitting out the rest of a game that still has an hour to go. The characters have enough special abilities to make them feel a bit different without being too difficult to quickly pick up and learn, and all the different equipment and abilities gives you lots of ways to evolve your playstyle. And of course, the dry erase idea is fantastic. Throw in a well thought out, if not hugely engaging solo mode, and it really is a nicely constructed, easily accessible game that I think would work really well as an introduction to fantasy gaming for casual gamers or younger gamers, as well as a quick diversion for any gamers who are looking for something that isn't going to tax their brains too much while still providing a way to go adventuring in a fantasy world. Indeed, even when I could feel my interest in the game drifting, my wife and daughter remained thoroughly entertained. My daughter was excited to discover new monsters, gain new items, and generally just beat me, while my wife really appreciated the smoothness of the turn structure and the lack of fiddly tokens that normally cause her to roll her eyes. And I like the froggy chappy. So there we have it, that's Glory from Hogg Publishing. If you like what you see here and would be interested in getting a copy, you can order direct from the publisher's website or from Good Time Games, both of which I will link to in the video description below. Once again, I must thank Hogg Publishing for sending in this game for a review and making this video possible. I must thank those of you who have chosen to become members of the Always Bored Never Boring Members Club, and I must thank everyone for taking the time to listen to me today. If you liked the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really liked the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.